Hello, welcome to the Bella Infidelity Stories channel, a place where we present genuine narratives filled with surprising turns. If you found the video enjoyable, consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. It truly contributes to the growth of our channel. Now let's immerse ourselves in the narrative. I've been with this company for nearly 3 years now. At 27, life has been treating me quite favorably. In the beginning, my main focus was simply to survive. However, I have begun to ascend the ladder, gradually yet confidently. Others pay attention to me, and even more significantly, they appear to appreciate my presence. My supervisor, Mr. Rubin, is a seasoned gentleman, likely in his mid-60s, yet he has consistently shown me kindness, not in a superficial, condescending manner, but sincerely. His wife, Ellie, is a few years his junior. She's captivating, truly captivating, and she's always been warm. But lately, I can't quite put my finger on it. Things just seem to have shifted. I began to observe it a few months back. She would offer me a smile that lingered just a moment longer than usual as we crossed paths. When she spoke to me, her voice carried a warmth, as if she were conversing with someone familiar rather than merely a colleague. She began to extend invitations to me, the occasional lunch, gatherings where others were not included. She began assigning me small tasks that exceeded my responsibilities, simply to gauge my response to them. Initially, I dismissed it as inconsequential. Perhaps her actions were simply an expression of kindness. Perhaps she perceived a quality within me that remained unnoticed by others. When she began advocating for my bonuses to be raised, that certainly raised some concerns. There was an inexplicable sense that something was amiss. She treated me uniquely, compared to everyone else in the office, and although I felt a sense of flattery, there was also a lingering discomfort that I couldn't shake off. Did I conjure that up in my mind? Was I overanalyzing it? Then one afternoon, I received a call that would alter the course of my life. Mr. Rubin requested my presence in his office. It wasn't out of the ordinary, yet the manner in which he expressed it caused me to hesitate. Approached his office, attempting to set aside the unsettling sensation in my gut, pondering whether I was on the verge of receiving an unforeseen assignment, or perhaps some insights regarding my performance. Upon entering, I found Mr. Rubin seated at his desk, his expression more somber than I had come to expect. "Mason, I have a unique request for you," he stated, his tone steady yet assertive. "Ellie's off to Paris next week for work, and she specifically requested your company." I paused for a moment, uncertain about the sounds reaching my ears. "Excuse me, could you clarify that?" "She'll be managing some meetings over there, and an extra hand would be appreciated. Your recent efforts have been impressive, and she has confidence in you." He explained that she is seeking your assistance with the logistics and any other support you may require during her visit. Thoughts surged through my mind like a whirlwind. This felt unusual. I had never been invited to accompany anyone on a business trip, especially not my boss's wife. I had collaborated with her before, yet this experience felt distinct. I had only witnessed her journeying solo or accompanied by others. Absolutely not with anyone from the company, especially not with me. However, Mr. Rubin, do you truly believe that? I suppose I don't. I found myself at a loss for words. I felt a wave of surprise wash over me, and I sensed he noticed it too. He nodded, anticipating the pause. "I'm aware it might seem a little unconventional, but it's a simple journey. Only a handful of days. I have already obtained approval from HR. Simply gather your belongings and prepare for departure. Your flight is scheduled for Monday morning. There's no reason to complicate things, Mason." He offered me comfort. I wished I could have probed him further, particularly about why Ellie had singled me out. But time was not on my side. He was already shifting his focus to other matters, and I aimed to avoid raising any eyebrows. Declining the offer was simply not an option for me. I found myself compelled to agree. That evening, I gathered my belongings. My mind was whirling. I was just getting ready for a business trip alongside Ellie. It was challenging to comprehend, yet it was unfolding before me, and deep down, I couldn't ignore the sense that something was amiss, as if I was stepping into a situation that remained just beyond my grasp. The following morning, the car arrived to collect me, and a sense of nervous anticipation washed over me. I had more than just business on my agenda for Paris. I was accompanying her. At the airport, I encountered Ellie. She wore a smile, as she often did, yet this time it carried an unmistakable hint of something new. Perhaps it was the way she gazed at me, as if an unvoiced connection existed between us. Perhaps it was merely my tendency to overanalyze once more. No matter what it was, I found it elusive and hard to identify. As we stepped onto the plane, I made an effort to concentrate on the journey that lay before us. Paris promised to be thrilling, didn't it? Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed that this would transcend the ordinary confines of a typical work journey. Something was unfolding in this place, and though I couldn't fully grasp its nature, an instinct told me that the revelation was imminent. The journey to Paris was uncomfortable. It's not quite what you might anticipate, however. Ellie exuded her usual charm, yet there was an unusual tension lurking beneath the surface. Perhaps it was merely my tendency to overanalyze. Yet each time she cast a glance in my direction, I couldn't shake the feeling that her gaze held a new significance. She had always been warm, but this seemed to carry a deeper significance. We touched down in Paris during the afternoon hours. The atmosphere was idyllic, a gentle breeze wafting the aroma of freshly baked baguettes and rich coffee. I was doing my utmost to concentrate on the journey, contemplating the business discussions we had lined up, the details of the tasks she would require my assistance with. Yet truthfully, my thoughts continually wandered back to the events that unfolded at the office. What was it about me that made Ellie specifically request my presence? Why should it be me? A car service collected us from the airport, whisking us directly to the hotel without delay. The setting was exquisite, a refined establishment nestled in the vibrant core of Paris. As we arrived, Ellie glanced at me with a smile. "Are you looking forward to this? It may seem a little unconventional, but I believe we will enjoy ourselves." "Setting work aside, naturally," she remarked, her tone inviting yet laced with an elusive undertone that I couldn't fully identify. I offered a smile, attempting to keep my tone light. "Absolutely, I'm simply pleased to lend a hand." Upon arriving at the hotel, we completed the check-in process and made our way to our respective rooms. Throughout the entire experience, I found myself continually reflecting on the circumstances at hand. I could see the reasons behind her request for my presence, yet at that moment, I lacked the bravery to confront her openly. I reassured myself that it was merely paranoia. Ultimately, it was a business journey after all. Upon arriving at our rooms, Ellie appeared to be in high spirits. She had a natural ability to put everyone at ease, yet today, there seemed to be something more beneath the surface. She inquired whether I would like to join her for dinner later, given that we had no meetings lined up until the next day. I consented, not giving it much thought. It appeared to be an ordinary action, yet I couldn't dismiss the sense that this was somewhat unusual. That evening, we gathered in the hotel lobby and ventured out to a quaint bistro nearby. The night cast a stunning glow over Paris. The city possessed an enchanting quality that rendered every detail more meaningful, as if even the tiniest instances deserved to be noticed. Initially, our discussion revolved around work, maintaining a professional demeanor, but as the evening progressed, the dialogue evolved. Ellie's inquiries grew increasingly intimate, delving deeper, and I couldn't overlook the intensity of her gaze upon me. She inquired about my family, my life back home, topics that had never piqued her interest previously. I discovered that I was sharing more than I expected. discussing matters I typically kept private. There existed an unusual comfort between us, a sensation that was both instinctive and subtly askew. As they sat down for dinner, Ellie's laughter rang true, yet an unspoken tension lingered in the atmosphere. A sensation washed over me, elusive yet undeniable. An unseen boundary was being breached, yet I found myself unable to identify it. After dinner, we strolled back to the hotel, the cobblestone streets illuminated by the gentle glow of the streetlights. Ellie inquired whether I was interested in heading up to the rooftop bar for a drink. After a brief pause, I concluded it was innocuous. With a nod of agreement, we ascended in the elevator to the top floor. The bar was almost deserted, with only a handful of patrons savoring the sight of the Paris skyline. Ellie ordered a bottle of wine, and we discovered a hidden nook that offered an exquisite view of the Eiffel Tower in the distance. Having never set foot in Paris prior to this moment, I allowed myself to truly savor the exquisite beauty of the city. Yet, as the wine began to pour, I observed a shift in Ellie's demeanor. Her inquiries grew sharper, and she began to lean in nearer, her gaze holding onto mine. I couldn't help but observe her proximity, the subtle way her hand would sometimes graze mine as she reached for a glass. I attempted to brush it off, yet the undeniable tension lingered between us. The dialogue had shifted beyond mere friendliness. Something deeper lingered beneath the surface. At a certain moment, Ellie fixed her gaze on me, her eyes burning with intensity, and uttered words that caught me completely off guard. "Mason, I must confess, you've been on my mind quite a bit recently, perhaps more than is advisable." I stood, still caught in a moment of uncertainty about how to react. My heart raced, and a wave of warmth surged through my chest. "Could you clarify what you mean?" I succeeded in asking, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. She smiled, though it lacked her typical warmth. It was an experience that felt deeply personal. I find it difficult to express this, but there's a bond I sense between us that seems to transcend mere professionalism. Thoughts surged through my mind, struggling to grasp the meaning behind her words. I understood the suggestion she was making, yet it was hard to accept. Ellie, the spouse of my superior, was expressing these thoughts to me. I was completely at a loss for words, unsure of how to respond. I found myself unexpectedly taken aback, and a part of me felt the urge to retreat and put an end to it. Yet there was another side of me, one I wasn't particularly proud of, that found myself drawn to her attention. I gazed at her, attempting to unravel the complexities of it all. "Ellie, I'm at a loss for words." Her hand rested on mine, a warm and comforting presence. "There's no need for you to speak just yet, Mason. I simply wanted to share this with you. You occupy my thoughts endlessly." There it stood. The revelation, the boundary that had been breached. I was uncertain about how to approach the situation, yet there was one truth I held firmly in my mind. Our relationship had irrevocably changed, and there was no turning back. The following days in Paris unfolded like a captivating storm. Initially, I aimed to maintain a professional demeanor, concentrating on the assignments Ellie had entrusted to me. Yet, the unrelenting tension between us was impossible to overlook. Whenever our paths intertwined in the hotel or at work, I sensed her gaze upon me, observing me with a scrutiny that surpassed that of anyone else. I began to understand that the warm gestures, the subtle touches, the way she would effortlessly praise me for the little things, it was more than mere casualness. It was intentional. I repeatedly reassured myself that I was just overanalyzing. Yet beneath the surface, I sensed that something wasn't quite right. Ellie was not acting this way with anyone else. Her treatment of me was unlike anything else. It wasn't solely due to her request for this trip. No, this was something beyond that. On the third day, Ellie and I found ourselves with a few hours of free time following our meeting with some clients. I intended to venture out and discover the city, perhaps enjoy a coffee or take in some sights. However, the moment I brought up the idea of departing the hotel, she flashed that familiar smile and proposed we have lunch together. She mentioned discovering a delightful little cafe close by, a spot she believed I would enjoy. I felt uncertain about my response, yet I found myself in agreement. At this juncture, I had already invested considerable time with her, and although the atmosphere was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, I couldn't simply disregard her presence. The situation was far from straightforward, particularly given the dynamics of our professional relationship. The cafe exuded a charming intimacy, its quaint design enveloping visitors in a warm, rustic ambience. Ellie and I discovered a cozy corner table by the window. I made every effort to maintain a casual tone as we chatted about the food, the weather, and work. Yet the heaviness of her presence was difficult to overlook. She was positioned a bit too near, her eyes fixed on me in a manner that stirred a sense of unease. "So, Mason," she began, her voice gentle and inviting, "I've been pondering a particular thought. You're quite clever, aren't you?" She smiled, yet there was an elusive quality behind that smile, something I couldn't quite grasp. I chuckled, awkwardly, attempting to dismiss it casually. "Thank you very much." I put forth my utmost effort. "No, really," she said, leaning in a bit closer. "I have observed you for some time now. Mason, you're destined for great things. Your determination has always impressed me." The warmth crept up to my cheeks. Was she being playful with me? The idea sent a flutter through my stomach, yet I couldn't ignore the way her gaze held me, something fierce and inescapable. For the next hour, we engaged in conversation, though the tone had changed. Ellie's praises had taken on a more intimate quality, her inquiries more insightful. She inquired about my aspirations, my future endeavors, my perspectives on connections. It felt as though she was attempting to penetrate the depths of my thoughts. I found myself caught between feeling flattered and feeling uneasy. I had never experienced someone, particularly not someone of her stature, express such a profound interest in me. Post-lunch, we strolled back to the hotel. The air carried a chill, yet the atmosphere between us crackled with an undeniable intensity. It was evident that she was relishing the impact she had on me. Each time our arms grazed or her hand rested on my shoulder, an exhilarating surge coursed through me. That evening, we convened once more with a few prospective clients, and I made every effort to maintain my concentration. As we made our way back to the hotel, fatigue washed over me, not from the day's activities, but from the relentless tide of emotions that Ellie had awakened within me. As we strolled along the hotel corridor, she came to a halt before her room. She glanced my way, and for an instant, we lingered in quietude. Her gaze held a certain intensity, a spark in her eyes that sent my heart into a frenzy. "Mason," she murmured softly, "I have something to ask you." My anxiety was already heightened, and her remarks only intensified the feeling. "What is it exactly?" She moved in, her voice a soft murmur. "Are you sensing it as well?" I paused, perplexed by her words. "What is there to feel?" Ellie paused, her gaze dropping momentarily, as if she were collecting her thoughts. She raised her gaze to meet mine once more, our eyes intertwining in a moment of connection. "This, the link. I understand." "You sense it, Mason. Your gaze reveals everything, leaving me breathless." I was at a loss for words. I felt the urge to speak, to utter any words that might shatter the stillness, to escape from this moment. Yet for some inexplicable reason, I found myself unable to do so. Her presence was overwhelming, and the intensity of her gaze made me feel as though I was slipping from my grasp. Before I had the chance to speak, she extended her hand and made contact with my arm. It's all right, Mason. No need to say anything at this moment. I wanted to share that I'm not alone in this feeling. We share a mutual understanding. I remained motionless, caught in a moment of uncertainty, grappling with the right words or actions. She had a point in a certain sense. There existed a connection between us, a truth that could not be ignored. Yet, the implications of this, of what we were both experiencing, were beyond my ability to fully grasp. She offered me a gentle, understanding smile, and then, without saying anything more, she turned and stepped into her room. I lingered for a moment, absorbing all that had just unfolded. Thoughts whirled in a chaotic dance. This had transformed into something beyond a mere business trip, and I had a strong feeling we were both in deep waters. I made my way back to my room, lost in thought, grappling with the sense that something significant had shifted, and I felt uncertain about my ability to manage it. The following morning, I awoke with a flutter in my stomach. The dialogue with Ellie lingered in my thoughts, refusing to fade away. She expressed her emotions plainly, leaving me in a state of confusion about how to navigate this situation. We found ourselves in Paris for professional reasons, yet it had evolved into something beyond mere business. There was an undeniable connection between us, a truth I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I attempted to rationalize it away. I put on my clothes, made an effort to dispel the remaining tension, and headed downstairs to join Ellie for breakfast. Upon my arrival at the hotel restaurant, she was already present, leisurely sipping her coffee. She appeared serene, composed, as though everything remained the same. Yet I understood the truth. Her eyes revealed everything. She continued to bear the burden of the events from the previous night. "Good morning, Mason." She welcomed me with that gentle, inviting smile of hers, her gaze meeting mine. It seemed as though she was anticipating my words, longing for me to utter something, anything, to shatter the stillness that enveloped us. "Good morning," I said, attempting to maintain a sense of normalcy, though my voice emerged somewhat strained. We took our seats, and for a brief instant, silence enveloped us. The atmosphere surrounding us was heavy with things left unsaid. It seemed as though we were both anticipating the other to take the initiative. At last, Ellie shattered the stillness. She started, her voice measured. "About last night, I want you to feel at ease. I just wanted to let you know that I didn't intend to create any pressure for you. I simply wanted you to grasp my perspective." I nodded, attempting to grasp the essence of her words. "I understand," I responded, despite my uncertainty about whether I actually did. She leaned in a bit, her voice becoming softer and more personal. "Mason, I've been in a long-term marriage. I'm not suggesting that I'm dissatisfied with my husband. He's a decent fellow. Yet there are moments when circumstances simply shift. Upon our meeting, an unfamiliar sensation washed over me, one I hadn't experienced in quite some time." She hesitated, and I could perceive the fragility reflected in her gaze. "I understand if your feelings differ from mine. I want you to understand how much you mean to me." I found myself at a loss for words in that moment. A part of me yearned to express that my feelings didn't align with hers, that this was misguided, and we ought to let it go. Yet another side of me, the one that had been attuned to her every glance, every touch, insisted that I was deceiving myself if I claimed I felt nothing. The reality was, I found myself drawn to her. For some time, I found myself entangled in a complicated situation. She was wed to my superior. She was unattainable. I inhaled deeply, seeking to find my balance. "I'm at a loss for words, Ellie. This is completely unforeseen." She smiled once more, a trace of melancholy flickering in her gaze. "I understand, Mason. I never intended for the situation to become so intricate. Yet there are moments when events unfold beyond our grasp. The remainder of breakfast unfolded. In a haze, I found myself grappling with her words, and as I reflected on them further, it became increasingly clear that she had a point. Changes had occurred, regardless of my desires. There was an unmistakable shift in the air, and uncertainty loomed over the path ahead, yet I felt compelled to acknowledge it, rather than turn away. I was unsure how to overlook it. The remainder of the day was consumed by meetings and conference calls. The task seemed remote, as if I were merely following a routine. Whenever Ellie glanced in my direction, I sensed her gaze lingering, as if she were anticipating my next action. However, I chose not to. I maintained my composure, striving to remain professional despite the whirlwind of thoughts in my mind. My mind was consumed by thoughts of her, by the emotions she stirred within me. That evening, we had plans to join some clients for dinner, but by the time we wrapped up, it was already quite late. The cool night air enveloped us as we strolled back to the hotel, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed as though we were the sole inhabitants of the city. It was clear to me that Ellie was still burdened by that same heaviness from before. She strolled a tad too near, her shoulder grazing mine from time to time. Upon reaching the hotel entrance, she halted and turned to confront me. Her expression shifted to one of seriousness, displaying a newfound focus that had eluded her throughout. "The day, Mason," she murmured softly. "I'm not seeking anything at this moment. I wanted to express my feelings clearly, and if you don't share the same sentiments, I will understand and respect your perspective. But if you do," she let her voice fade, the unspoken words hanging in the air. I found myself at a loss for words. A part of me yearned to extend my hand, to draw her nearer, to bridge the distance between us. Yet another part of me was urgently urging me to halt, to turn away from this before it escalated any further. "I'm feeling quite uncertain, Ellie. I acknowledge that this is quite overwhelming to take in." She nodded, her expression becoming gentler. "I see where you're coming from, Mason. I don't anticipate you having every solution. However, I felt it was important for you to understand my position." I remained in place, gazing at her for what felt like an eternity, my heart racing within me. I realized I stood at a pivotal moment, and any choice I made from this point forward would irrevocably alter the course of my life. Ellie offered a brief smile before she pivoted and made her way toward a room. I observed her departure, a sense of suspended anticipation enveloping me, bracing for what was bound to come. No matter what unfolded, I understood it was no longer within my control. The days after the dinner in Paris seemed to stretch into an infinite haze. Ellie and I made attempts to revert to our usual selves, yet it felt utterly unattainable. And unspoken tension lingers in the air between us, palpable yet unacknowledged. We were both aware that a change had occurred, yet neither of us found the bravery to confront it openly. Each look, each utterance seemed heavy with significance. We passed the rest of the journey in quiet during work hours, our professional masks firmly in place. Yet the intervals in between told a different story. I couldn't help but observe the way she would linger just a tad too near, or how her fingers would lightly graze against mine as she handed me something. It may have been little, yet it served as a stark reminder that we were treading on perilous ground. On the eve of our return to the States, Ellie and I found ourselves at the hotel bar sharing a drink. She appeared at ease now, her smile slightly more genuine, yet I could discern in her eyes that she still bore the burden of all the unspoken words between us. "Mason," she began, her tone steady yet resolute. "I've been reflecting on our situation, and I want to keep things straightforward and not add any unnecessary complexity." A tight knot formed in my stomach, as if I was already preparing for the impending moment. "I have no regrets about anything." "That transpired," she said, maintaining eye contact with me. "However, I am aware that we cannot continue on this trajectory. This situation isn't just for either of us. I am married. Your professional journey is set. This cannot put everything at risk." I nodded, sensing a burden ease from my chest, despite my lingering uncertainty about it all. "I concur," I spoke, making an effort to maintain a calm tone. "It's time for us to progress." Her lips trembled into a faint, nearly melancholic smile. "It's for the best," she murmured softly. "I have no desire to cause anyone pain, nor do I wish to place you in a situation where you must decide between me and your professional aspirations." The anguish in her gaze was palpable, mingled with remorse, yet there lingered a hint of liberation. She was finally releasing whatever had propelled both her and me from the very beginning. I, too, was prepared to turn my back and leave. We completed our drinks in quietude, and as we rose to depart, an unusual tranquility enveloped us. I realized that this marked the conclusion. What had begun between us in Paris had come to an end. We were both aware of it, and there was no turning back. The journey back to the States was quite ordinary. We were side by side, yet there were no lingering looks, no hidden grins. It felt as if we had silently come to an understanding to act as though nothing had transpired. I immersed myself in my laptop, responding to emails and striving to keep myself engaged. Meanwhile, Ellie found herself adrift in her own musings, her gaze drifting occasionally to the window. As we touched down and navigated through the airport, the tension dissipated, leaving behind no unspoken words lingering in the air between us. Our time in Paris felt like a brief interlude, a moment we both understood was best left in the past. Upon returning to the office, the atmosphere settled back into its usual rhythm. Mr. Rubin was as occupied as always, and I had returned to my regular schedule. Ellie and I shared courteous hellos, yet there was nothing beyond that. A boundary had been established, and mutual respect was upheld. We had made our decisions, and there was no reason to dwell on the past. It was a challenge, and I wouldn't be truthful if I claimed she didn't cross my mind occasionally. The memory of her gaze lingering, the electric sensation of her touch still vivid. Yet, I was certain that our choice was the correct one. It was finished, and the reality was that I had no desire to make my life any more intricate than it already was. Ellie chose to remain silent on the matter from that point forward. I also never did that. We each found our own paths forward. The office had settled into a hush, and the brief interactions we once had seemed like echoes from the past. It was evident that she had come to terms with it. What about me? I was discovering the art of release. Regarding my professional journey, the outlook was promising. At last, the promotion I had been yearning for arrived, bringing with it the acknowledgement I truly merited. I came to understand that ultimately, it was more beneficial to concentrate on what truly mattered, my craft and my future. I successfully sidestepped the trap of allowing my personal life to interfere, and for that I felt a sense of gratitude. Ellie remained in her marriage with Mr. Rubin, and I kept my distance from their affairs. I maintained my distance, put in the effort, and pressed on. The memories of my time in Paris would forever linger in my mind, yet I understood that it was merely a chapter in my life, a chapter that had now come to an end. I stood prepared for whatever lay ahead. The chapter had closed, and I found peace within it.